I'm Jacob Courtwright, and this is The Locker Room. What's going on, everybody? Welcome into The Locker Room. Thank you again for joining me today. If you're new, welcome into the program. If you're returning, welcome back, Locker Room faithful. Many big changes are coming to The Locker Room in 2022. We have a co-host that will be with us every single week, so a bunch of new things. So stay up to date with us at TLR Podcast 615. That is TLR Podcast 615 on all of our social medias. Stay up to date with everything we have going on. And just enjoy mounds and mounds of content that is exclusive to some of our social medias. And I know a lot of that is slowed down, but that's for good reason because, like I said, in 2022, we're doing big things here at the Locker Room Podcast going on year 2, so very excited. Let's get into the program. This episode is brought to you by FNX Fitness. Go to fnxfit.com, that is fnxfit.com, for all of your gym needs. From clothing that is made right here in the USA, to supplements that are made right here in the USA, from gym equipment like gloves, braces, everything you need for a better gym experience, FNX Fitness has you covered. And use your promo code TLRHOST, that is TLRHOST, all capitals, for 15% off your order. Okay, here's the deal. Jake Paul finally catches another break. Of course he catches another break. Let's talk about it. Jake Paul is no longer fighting Tommy Fury. For those of you who don't know, you're not on social media, or you listen to this podcast for all of your sports news, I would say find a better news source. But also, Tommy Fury had some sort of chest virus that he had been dealing with for over a month. So got back into sparring shortly after that. And after he came back from his 4-week hiatus, he sustained apparently a couple of injuries from, I guess it was just from the wear and tear of not being in shape and not training for the last 4 weeks or not being able to train. So Tommy Fury's out. No longer will he be fighting Jake Paul on December the 18th, 19th, one of those 2 days. I'm so mad. Like, genuinely, I'm mad. Because this was going to be the first real boxing match that Jake Paul was going to have. This was going to be the first way for Jake Paul to finally solidify his name as a boxer. This was going to be the first time that Jake Paul was going to have a respected opponent around his same size, around his same weight, and somebody that was in the sport to be in the sport. Not celebrity. This isn't Ben Askren, fat, out of shape, 5 months after, intense back surgery, who walked out there just to collect a $2 million paycheck. This isn't Tyron Woodley, who was a UFC fighter. And while, yes, he's the realest fighter that Jake Paul's fought, there was a bunch of stipulations to that, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. This wasn't Nate Robinson, literally 4 foot tall, never putting on boxing gloves in his life, going out there to fight somebody quadruple his size, quadruple his weight, quadruple his reach, and quadruple his skill. This was going to be a boxer versus a boxer. This was going to be Tommy Fury, an amateur fighter, boxing Jake Paul, an amateur fighter. I truly think this was going to be one of the only ways that Jake Paul finally solidified his name in the books as a real boxer. And I think he would have gotten a lot of support from the boxing community. You see, right now, Jake Paul's not really getting support from anybody. He's getting support from his YouTube followers. He's getting support from, his brother. But Jake Paul is not respected in the fight game. No one looks at him and takes him seriously when it comes to boxing. They look at him as a quick cash grabber, great entrepreneur, because that's what he is. He's smart. He's collecting the paycheck that he needs to collect. He's promoting himself. He's growing his brand. He's a fake fighter that's trotting around as a real boxer. He's doing exactly what he should be doing to get hit. That's his hustle. Congrats to Jake. He's learned how to manipulate the system. He's learned how to get his hustle. He's learned how to sell millions of tickets. He's learned how to box people that no one cares about and still have millions tune in all over. So congrats. Jake is just doing his hustle. But Jake Paul, the boxer, was going to come out of this next fight. Jake Paul wins this next fight against an amateur boxer in Tyson Fury and Tommy Fury. And by the way, Tommy Fury is also not that good of a boxer. He's just a young amateur boxer who's also really never fought anybody. But that is a name that is respected in boxing for the simple fact that his brother Tyson's the greatest heavyweight of all time, or at least in this generation. I'm not going to get into that fight. And somebody who is actually a trained boxer, someone who knows the sport of boxing, not someone who's picking it up who used to play basketball, not someone who's picking it up who was a wrestler turned UFC wrestler turned amateur boxer, not Tyron Woodley, who is a great fighter in his own right in the UFC, but with all the different restrictions and the handcuffs they put him under for the fight, basically was null and void. This was going to be the only opportunity we got. And it's done. And the problem is Tommy Fury's the one that pulled out of the fight, not Jake Paul. If this was Jake Paul, I think the entire community, the entire fighting community, boxing community would finally laugh at Jake, point fingers at Jake and say, listen, you're finally running away from a fight. Look at this. But no, it had to be Tommy Fury. He had to get his, and here's the deal. I don't know how much of Tommy Fury's story is true and how much of it is his dad and Tyson Fury thinking that he's not ready to go fight someone like Jake Paul. Because there is a lot at stake with this fight. There's a lot at stake for Tommy Fury in this fight. I mean, Tommy Fury loses this fight to Jake Paul. Not only does that solidify Jake Paul as a real boxer, not only does that boost Jake Paul's brand into upper echelon craziness. Not only does he get to run around and brag and say, you all said I'm not a real, and I mean, listen, I would be on the receiving end of it, because I've repeatedly said, fight somebody that's a real boxer, fight someone your own age, fight someone your own weight class, fight someone your own size, then we'll talk. And if he were to beat Tommy Fury, I mean, he now gets to tell everybody like me to shut the hell up. So Tommy Fury had a lot of pressure. I mean, he's got a brother, Tyson Fury, who he can't let the family name down. I mean, Tyson Fury even said if he loses, he's changing his last name. I don't care what he says. Daddy Fury, he's been very, very hard on Tommy. And if you look at a lot of the sparring sessions, his dad's been getting super frustrated in front of the media because he's like, listen, stop paying attention to these cameras. You're a fighter first and foremost. Like the Tyson bloodline are fighters. Tommy Fury got into the spotlight early with a reality TV show, and then he's a boxer. Like, the problem with him is he's trying to balance two different worlds. And I honestly don't know if he genuinely got a chest virus and then got injured because he hopped into training too quick, or if Tommy Fury wasn't ready for this fight, and Daddy Fury said, you're done. You're not going. You're not going to embarrass us. You're not going to lose to Jake Paul. Because that would be embarrassing. I mean, Tommy Fury, who comes from a bloodline of fighters, comes from one of the greatest heavyweight boxers of all time, definitely in this generation, losing to a YouTuber, does not bode well for the Furies. And I genuinely think that Tommy Fury, Jake Paul might be right. He said Fumbles Fury. He said Tommy fumbles. And he fumbled this one, fumbled his opportunity, fumbled his moment. He would have been, if Tommy Fury wins this fight, he is literally 80% of the world's hero. Like, I'll give Jake Paul 20% of people that support him, but 80% of people hate Jake Paul like I do, and he would have been a hero. I would have given anything for Jake Paul to be the one to back out, because that would have finally showed us all his true colors. Like, oh, look, Jake Paul's backing out of this fight. He doesn't want this fight. He doesn't want to fight a real boxer. But no, Tommy Fury has to pull out. And I genuinely think that maybe there's a little bit to do with Tommy Fury not being ready. I think there's a little bit to do with maybe his injury. But I think there's a lot to do with he has to protect the Tyson Fury name. He has to protect the Fury name. And I don't know that he was equipped to do that at that moment. Now, it could be because of the injury. It could be because of the chest virus keeping him out of training. But I just don't know that Daddy Fury was going to go let him fight. We've seen several videos of Daddy Fury being furious, no pun intended, with with Tommy because Tommy's paying attention to the cameras. Tommy's not focusing. He's not training as hard. Well, guess what? When you come up as a reality TV star, you're going to have a tough time getting into the fight. You're going to have a tough time locking in to be a fighter. And the Furies are fighters. Tommy Fury, the problem with him, like I said, is this man's a reality fighter. There's a big difference. See, he is what Jake Paul is. He is a TV, he's an entertainer fighter. He's an entertainer boxer. That's what he is. And what I mean by that is he is somebody that dabbles in the entertainment industry via TV, via podcasts, whatever, but he also fights on the side. And Jake Paul's found a way to make that work. Tommy Fury hasn't. It's not like Tommy Fury's last fight was against a guy that he should have wiped the floor with, knocked him out in 5 seconds, and he went to a decision. So Tommy Fury had a ton of pressure. And the problem is Jake Paul has perfected the entertaining boxing industry. Tommy Fury has not. So there's a lot that goes into this. Am I pissed? Yeah, I'm pissed. We should be getting Tommy Fury, Jake Paul, Tommy Fury finally putting Jake Paul on his ass and us never having to listen to Jake Paul again. Like I said, the first time Jake Paul loses a fight, he is done. The first time Jake Paul loses a fight, he is done. I will say it one more time. The first time Jake Paul loses a fight, he is done. This amateur fighting crap will go out the window. He's going to retire. Mark my words, he will retire. If he loses one fight, he's retiring. Because he's therefore irrelevant. Right now, the reason Jake Paul's popular is because people are interested in the mystique. People are interested in, oh, is he a good fighter? Is he a bad fighter? What's up with him? People are interested. He loses one fight, no one's going to care anymore. If Tommy Fury beats him, no one cares anymore. And the problem is he's going to now be able to run around and keep fighting UFC fighters, keep fighting YouTubers, keep fighting this, keep fighting, and never have to fight another boxer for a long time. Because he's already talked about not giving Tommy Fury another opportunity. So now we're stuck in a world where Jake Paul can run his mouth and say, I tried to fight a real fighter, but that fighter backed out, and blah, blah, blah. So now he has full reins to fight Tyron Woodley again, December 18th, December 19th, one of those two dates. I can't remember which one. So Tommy Fury, you disappointed me. I'm very upset. Now let's get to the Let's get to the Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley fight. So my problem with the first fight was, and I talked about this on the show, I said, and you can go back and listen to the episodes, they're all marked. I said how many times, if this was a fair, honest fight, Tyron Woodley would win. If this fight had no rules, if this fight did not have any stipulations, if it was just fighter e fighter, boxer v UFC fighter, Tyron Woodley's too good to not win. And what happened? I told you it smelled fishy after the fight. I said Tyron Woodley had Jake Paul against, not only did he have him against the ropes, he had him unconscious against the ropes. Tyron Woodley landed the only significant shot in that entire fight. He had Jake Paul dazed. Jake Paul hit the back of the ropes. Jake Paul almost gets knocked out. And guess what? Does Tyron Woodley push forward and knock him out? Nope. Tyron Woodley backs way up to the other side of the ring. Tyron Woodley dances around, doesn't even really do any more damage the rest of the round. And I said, man, that smells fishy. That seems fishy. It makes no sense that Tyron Woodley would have Jake Paul, and trust me, as a UFC fighter, he is trained to push that. He is trained to go finish what he just did. In the UFC, you don't let people regain consciousness because we have seen one too many times. When you don't rush somebody, they can come back, and all it takes is one punch and one kick. All it takes is one moment in fighting for it to be completely over. So that's why you never give somebody that other opportunity. You go finish that fight. Bam, bam. Jake Paul hits the back of the ropes. Jake Paul's dazed. He's stumbling around. Tyron Woodley taps him once or twice more to the body. Then just backs up. Lets Jake Paul fully regain, get his legs back under him. Fight continues. Jake Paul inevitably wins via decision. And I said, man, this is fishy. It doesn't make sense. Tyron Woodley had him. And listen, Tyron Woodley had some of these problems in the UFC, though, where towards the end of his career, just not being able to finish out fights. So I said, maybe it's just Tyron Woodley. But no. We found out shortly after, and I called it, and some of you called me crazy. I said that this was rigged, and guess what? It was rigged. We found out that Tyron Woodley had a no knockout clause of Jake Paul. We found out that Tyron Woodley couldn't do his job, which was to knock Jake Paul out. We found out that Jake Paul doesn't really want to be a fighter. We found out that Jake Paul only likes fights that he knows are rigged in his favor. Because boxing v. boxing, Jake is a better boxer. But if you want a boxer versus a real fighter, Tyron Woodley is a real championship level fighter, a UFC champion, and he won that fight if he's allowed to knock Jake Paul out. So this is my biggest problem with Jake Paul. Is Jake Paul gets called out for his bullcrap. We find out that there was a no knockout clause. We find out that Tyron Woodley wasn't allowed to do any more damage and that he had to let Jake Paul basically, that just gives it away. Tyron Woodley's a one-punch superstar, and he took the only thing that Tyron Woodley does good or great at away from him and said, well, you can't knock me out. If you want your money, you can't knock me out. First off, Tyron, you're a little punk. You heard me, and I'll say it to your face. You're a punk. You are a punk. You're a pushover. You're a man of the system. Maybe if you learned how to deal with your money properly from the UFC, you wouldn't be begging for your millions from Jake Paul. Because I would have gone out there. I would have cleaned this kid's clock. Because guess what? You would have made more money with the interviews. You would have made more money with the endorsements. You would have made more money from your new single, I knocked out Jake Paul, or I killed Jake Paul, whatever, new single. Because the other one was like Kick Your Ass or something like that, and it was a song about Jake Paul. You would have made more money off of your song talking about how you knocked out Jake Paul than you would from letting Jake Paul win that fight by not being able to knock him out. That's a punk move. That's a rigged punk move. You go out there and you finish that fight. You go out there, you knock him out, you say, keep your paycheck. You talk into the microphone afterwards and say, yo, Jake Paul tried to bribe me. There was a contract that said no knockout clause. I said, screw that. I knocked him out. Done and done. Everybody would have loved Tyron Woodley. Jake Paul finally would have been out of everybody's faces. We wouldn't have to hear about his no knockout clause. We wouldn't have to hear about Jake Paul being a fighter anymore. Done. Over with. But you're a punk, Tyron Woodley. You need to man up. You should have knocked Jake Paul out. You shouldn't have taken a contract that you're not allowed to knock somebody out in, because that is a punk move. That being said, Tyron Woodley would kill me if we ever were face to face. I get that. But you tell me in good consciousness how you can take a fight when there's rules and stipulations to how you can fight. When there's, well, you can't knock Jake Paul out. Well, you can't hit him in the face too many times. Well, you can't throw too hard of a body shot. Where's your manhood, Tyron? Why do you think you keep losing you lost a bunch of UFC fights in a row and then you inevitably got kicked out by Dana White? Because you were a punk. Be a man. Grow up. When you were a savage, when you were a UFC champion, you were somebody that was feared across the board. Now, nah. These fighters don't care. Jake Paul don't care. Jake Paul should be terrified to send you a contract that says, please don't knock me out. Because the first thing I would have done is I would have said, screw the money. I would have gone out there, knocked him unconscious, head hit the canvas, whole crowd goes quiet, and just picked up the microphone and been like, yeah, Jake Paul's a punk. He tried to make me not knock him out. Done and done. You're a hero to everybody, especially a hero to me. Your brand is massive. You knocked out Jake Paul. Jake Paul finally goes away. You would be a hero, a living legend. But instead, you're a punk. So I say it again. In this fight, who should win? Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley should knock Jake Paul out. Tyron Woodley should knock Jake Paul out. Tyron Woodley, if he is allowed, will knock Jake Paul out. But are we going to get another bullcrap contract? Probably. And that is why I'm so done with these fights. Because if these fights were honest, if these fights were real, then we would have had Jake Paul already knocked out. We wouldn't be talking about this anymore, and we could move on in our lives. But the problem is now we can't. Now I've got Jake Paul back in my life. Now I got Tyron Woodley back in my life, and I have to stay up at 10 o'clock at night, hear 25 concerts before the real fights actually start, watch this fight at 2 in the morning for it to probably end in a unanimous decision, Jake Paul win again, because Tyron Woodley's not allowed to knock him out. So here's the deal. I don't know that I'm going to be watching this fight. I say that, but I probably will watch this fight. But if this fight is rigged, I promise you this will be the last fight I ever watch. If we find out afterwards that there was a no knockout clause, if we find out that there was a no finishing clause, then I'm done. You will never hear me talk about Jake Paul on this show again. You will never hear me talk about any of these celebrity boxing matches again. I will pack up my bag and go home. Done. So I'm picking Tyron Woodley already. Tyron Woodley's going to win this fight via knockout if it's allowed. If there's no knockouts allowed, Jake Paul will win unanimous decision. There's not going to be any exciting moments. And Tyron Woodley will forever be the biggest punk to ever come out of the UFC.
And that's the way the news goes.
Okay, so a lot has been happening in the NFL. And when a lot happens, I've got to re-update my Super Bowl predictions. And I'm not changing who my Super Bowl predictions are, but I am going to update my top 5 teams to make it that have potential to make it to the Super Bowl. This is in no particular order. I'm not ranking these teams. I'm just giving you my 5 teams that I think are most likely to make it to a Super Bowl. So here we go. Let's go with the Los Angeles Rams still. The Los Angeles Rams are starting to figure things out. And here's the deal. Von Miller being added to that defense is going to be huge in the long run. It might not be great right now for the regular season, but come playoff time, when you have a Von Miller, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey trio, it is going to be very, very difficult to go against that defense. It's going to be very difficult to run against that defense. And what's most important when it comes playoff time in the NFL? Balance. What's most important when it comes to playoff time in the NFL? They are not a one-dimensional team, because guess what? The Kansas City Chiefs learned that you never win Super Bowls that way. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers learned that if you have a great balance, you're going to dominate Super Bowls that way. There's been very few times in history that one side of the offense dominates, whether that's an air raid or a running. It's usually got to be balanced, because at the end of the day, when it gets that late in the season, when you get to the big dance, there's just the other team's just too good. They're good against the run, good against the pass, so you have to keep them guessing. You have to keep them on their toes. If you're going to air raid, guess what? They'll sit back and nickel, and then they'll just pick you to death. So you have to be balanced. And when you're going against the Los Angeles Rams defense, it's going to be very, very difficult to be balanced. You have a corner that is the best in the league right now in Jalen Ramsey. Absolute lockdown corner. It's going to be very difficult for teams to pass, or very difficult for teams like, let's say, the Green Bay Packers, who have Devontae Adams is now going to have to be going up against Jalen Ramsey. Now you're going to have who? Exactly. Randall Cobb is going to become your new number 1 after Jalen Ramsey and Devontae Adams battle it out. That's where the difficulty comes. And then when you have Aaron Donald, who deserves a double team to triple team almost every time, and now Von Miller coming in on the other side, that's a recipe for disaster. Matthew Stafford starting to pick it up. We're starting to see OBJ and Matthew Stafford find a connection. Cooper Kupp is the best wide receiver in the NFL this year. I mean, Tyler Higbee, this team has weapons. They've got a quarterback that, yeah, even though he's not really been battle-tested deep into the playoffs, is still a very good quarterback. This team is going to be dangerous on both sides of the football. They're staying there for me. I can't drop them off. I know we get so jumpy in sports media with, oh, well, they lost 2 in a row. They lost 3 in a row. They lost a game that they shouldn't. They're back to being one of the worst teams in football. No. I have never wavered off of my Rams, and I'm not going to wait. They're not my Rams, okay? Go Bears. Tighten up. But I've never wavered off the Rams being one of my leaders to make it to the Super Bowl, and I'm not going to start now. Los Angeles Rams. Team that I just mentioned, Green Bay Packers. I mean, even though Aaron Rodgers might be the biggest scumbag known to man. Yeah, I've been immunized. Hey, Aaron, when you said you've been immunized, what did you mean by that? Well, what I meant was I had a Capri Sun. Oh, okay. That makes no damn sense. I mean, Aaron Rodgers lied to everybody on national TV, and he deserves to be suspended and/or deserves to be kicked out for the rest of the NFL season if we're going to take COVID so seriously in the NFL and in the NBA, but all of a sudden we're not going to because it's Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. I mean, that's just coming from a Bears fan's perspective. Aaron Rodgers should no longer be playing football this year, but that's just me, all right? So Aaron Rodgers goes out there, he lies to the world, but he's winning football games. I mean, the Green Bay Packers look darn good, and that defense is finally starting to show up. Aaron Rodgers, I think, and this is a tough one for me, it's very tough to not choose Aaron Rodgers over Tom Brady right now. If it wasn't for the fact that I just love Tom Brady because he's the greatest, he just gets it done. Let's put it that way. Tom Brady just gets it done when he needs to get it done. Tom Brady might be terrible or might be decent throughout 3 quarters, but when it comes down to the final 5 minutes, I trust Tom Brady to go get me my game-winning drive well over Aaron Rodgers. But as far as overall play thus far this year, I would say Aaron Rodgers has been playing a lot better than Tom Brady. I think Aaron Rodgers has played arguably the best football from the quarterback position thus far this year. And that's coming from a Bears fan who absolutely despises Aaron Rodgers, who should be suspended, who should be kicked out the rest of the season, who should be banned from playing in the NFL ever again. But at the end of the day, the Green Bay Packers, when you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers, a transcendent talent, a once-in-a-lifetime generation kind of guy, and he's still playing at this elite of a level, and you have Davante Adams, the best wide receiver in the NFL probably this year next to Cooper Kupp. I would go Cooper Kupp then Davante Adams. Like, just an unstoppable machine. That combination is just ridiculous. Aaron Jones is what's that? It's that Dillon kid in the backfield. I can't remember his full name. But, I mean, they've got a running tandem. Matt LaFleur's done a great job up in Green Bay. Even though him and Aaron Rodgers have had their duke-outs, they've had their public drama. The Green Bay Packers are an overall great team, and I foresee them being in the championship game. Not the Super Bowl necessarily, but I definitely see them in the NFC Championship game, and I think it's going to be a fun NFC battle this year. Another team that is definitely going to be in the Super Bowl contention, Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Bucks. I just don't get sports media. They have like one bad game. Gronk is injured. Like, half their team's injured. Their defense isn't playing the greatest that it has, but we're only 6 games in, and then everybody goes, oh, well, here it is. Here go the Bucks are on the downward spiral. They had to shut up. Tom Brady's still the best quarterback in the NFL. Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady is the best tandem, best duo in the NFL. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is returning all of its starters. They'll be fine. I mean, Bruce Arians is going to have this team right where he needs them to be. Tom Brady is Tom Brady. That's all that really matters in this conversation, is that Tom Brady's not dropping off a cliff. He's not, not being able to throw a ball past 5 yards like Peyton Manning in his last couple of seasons. Like, he's still being able to throw an accurate, productive football down the field, and him and Rob Gronkowski are just on another level. I mean, they're just scoring every freaking week. So when you have the greatest quarterback of all time and the greatest tight end of all time, of course you're going to be in Super Bowl contention. Oh, and also when you're returning all of your starters from a Super Bowl championship team, they're going to know what it takes to get it done in the moments. We harp so much on little moments, and I know why. Sports media harps on it because they need something to talk about on Monday morning. Let's talk about how the Bucs are terrible. Let's talk about how Tom Brady doesn't look like Tom Brady. Let's talk about how time's catching up with Tom. Let's talk about how Rob Gronkowski's injured. Let's talk about how Bruce Arians needs to be fired. Like, you go down these rabbit hole, sports media, because you're just looking for a story for your Monday morning. When at the end of the day, I've never hit the panic button one time on the Tampa Bay Bucs. I've never hit the panic button one time on the Los Angeles Rams. You just don't. When you have teams that are that good, having 1 or 2 bad weeks is not going to make or break their season. Also, that boy Leonard Fournette, he's the most productive running back this year. Also, I will never pick up Christian McCaffrey in the history of fantasy football again. And I love Christian McCaffrey, and he's so productive when he plays. But when he plays is the big question mark here. God bless. I have Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley. I have the trifecta of screw you, Jacob. Ridiculous. Nonetheless, Leonard Fournette's a bad man. That man just looks like he's having fun playing football. Got his dumbass LSU pads sticking out every Sunday, but I love it. I'm all for it. Leonard Fournette is one of the most productive backs, if not the most productive back thus far this year. I love what I'm seeing from him. And the Bucs are dangerous for the simple fact that they have not only found balance, but they found great balance. The only thing that scares me for the Buccaneers is Brown. Antonio Brown, we hear about this whole COVID situation. It's a giant headache again. Will that affect the team? Because we do know that Brown is a big piece. I don't know. It's going to be very, very interesting to see where this goes, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be right back in that conversation. Next up, freaking give me the Patriots. I'm jumping on the bandwagon here. They're the simple reason that I'm updating my Super Bowl predictions. What the frick, man? If you don't agree that Bill Belichick is the greatest coach of all time, then you just need to shut your face. Bill Belichick's the greatest coach of all time. Who wins a game throwing 3 passes and only completing 2? And if we really want to look at it even more detailed, 1 pass was a bobble off one hand Superman catch. So really only one throw that was decent that went for 3 yards. Who wins a football game against a team like the Buffalo Bills in that situation? The Patriots do. Bill Belichick does. I'm so done. I mean, I don't. Do I have to hop on this bandwagon too? I think I'm going to. I hate the New England Patriots, but Bill Belichick's the greatest coach of all time. He's also the biggest asshole of all time, but he's the greatest coach of all time. And he's done a fantastic job inspiring this team. 7 straight. That's not easy in the NFL. We saw the Bills lose to the Jacksonville Jaguars. We've seen the Titans lose to the Jets. We've seen many upsets this year. It's not easy to win 4 in a row in the NFL. It's not easy to win 5 in a row, let alone 7, with a rookie quarterback in Mac Jones. Oh, and the last game you won, he threw 3 balls, completed 2 of them. The Patriots defense, being led by Judon and Dante Hightower, is just exactly what the doctor ordered. The Patriots play football the most Patriot way. They play football like it's 1935. They have a great defense that gets after the quarterback, that makes you earn every single yard, every single first down, every single touchdown, and they have an offense that just plays to its strengths. They have a running back core that just seems to be endless, and they've got Mac Jones, which why the world of sports gave Mac Jones to the New England Patriots, no one will ever know, because Mac Jones is a prototypical guy for Bill Belichick. Someone who knows how to throw an accurate ball, who can throw a deep ball from time to time, but is just going to put an accurate football in between the numbers, 15 yards and in. That's what Mac Jones is. That's what Mac Jones did at Alabama, and that's what he will do for years and years and years and years and years for the New England Patriots. I mean, I can't be too mad. He's done a great job coaching. Mac Jones is exactly what I thought he was. Nothing special, a good starting quarterback for the New England Patriots. If Mac Jones was anywhere else, I think he would struggle mightily, but he's in the perfect situation with the perfect head coach, with an offensive line that knows how to hold up, with a running core that knows how to support him, and with a defense led by Dante Hightower and Matthew Judon that is 3rd, 4th best in the NFL. So the New England Patriots have snuck their way into my heart and into my top 5 predictions for the Super Bowls. And finally, I mean, I can't discount the Kansas City Chiefs. Even though, screw you, Patrick Mahomes, for fantasy, the one year I go out on a leap and I'm like, yo, I'm taking P. Holmes like 3rd overall, not 3rd overall, but like 3rd round. Like, I'm just going to take my QB right out the gate. Usually I go running back, wide receiver, quarterback later. But I mean, damn, bro. You just destroying my fantasy. I mean, I'm getting like 12, 15, 20 points from this guy. Oh, and guess what? What did he average last year? Oh, like 35 and above. So, Patrick Mahomes, you're dead to me. But, I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs are the Kansas City Chiefs. They're winning football games, and they're still not back on track. Once they get back on track, and I'm still in that mode that I think they will get back on track. I know a lot of people are like, oh, they're never going to get back on track, which might be very, very possible. I'm just going out on a leap here and saying that they will get back on track. They don't need a defense that is going to stop teams from getting 21-plus points, because they're going to be able to put up 48-plus points. So their defense doesn't have to do much more than what it's doing now. All the Kansas City Chiefs really need is for Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman, insert other player here. Once they get on track, you have Williams back, you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire back finally. Now that you have all these guys back on track, now that you have all these guys starting to get healthier, once they get back on track and on the same page with Patrick Mahomes, this is a team that is going to make a very deep playoff run and most likely a Super Bowl appearance if they can get it clicking at the right time. Let's be honest here. The Tennessee Titans are struggling against teams that they should be winning even without Derrick Henry. Tannehill's not impressed me, so I can't put the Tennessee Titans up here in good conscience, good faith. So Kansas City, my final team to round out my 5 Super Bowl teams as of week. Oh, I wonder what week we're in. We're in week, don't tell me. We are in week, 12, 13, something like that. 11, 10? I don't know. We'll figure it out, but we're far into the season. There it is. My top 5 teams. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it. See ya. Goodbye. Get out of here. But before you do, make sure you're following The Locker Room on our social media, TLR Podcast 615. There's so much coming in 2022 you do not want to miss. I promise you that. Thank you to everybody who's listening. Thank you to all my new listeners. Thank you to you Locker Room faithful. Once again, everybody, I'm Jacob Courtwright. This is The Locker Room.